Hi everyone, it's my absolute pleasure to be here at the end of the second day of the Contemplative Science Symposium to share with you the two key takeaways that I have gained from attending the panel's discussion so far, and also the breakaway workshops which allowed us to enter into discourse with experts on the panel and ask our questions. So there have been 5 panels so far. The order was neuro and cognitive science and politics on the first day, which really laid the foundation. And then today we went into nutrition, philosophy and economics. The workshops I attended were on politics. I was particularly interested in institutional design and evolution. And I was also particularly interested to hear what some of the innovators in the British Parliament actually have done to bring mindfulness to parliamentarians, in a big scale, and how that good work is actually spreading to other governments across the world as well. And I also attended a workshop on economics. I was particularly interested in the practitioners and the researchers' point of view on resistance to change, change for the better, that I frequently encounter when I work with business. But at the same time, also the enormous potential for business as a mechanism for good. Business can be a very effective mechanism to drive change for the greater good. And so I really appreciated a chance to ask the panelists, to share their insights on that, and that was really wonderful. So, in taking a step back from all the richness that we've listened to, in these last 2 days, and I digested all of that and thought to myself, what are the key nuggets? And there are 2 I'd like to share with you. The first one is, from everything I heard from across the different silos, we are now ready for rollout and test bidding. And this is a critical point in the change management, or not even change management, change, that's not a good word anymore, the change seeding or propagation or invitation. We're now ready, with all the various things that I heard from the panels to roll out. Why? Because several things are now in place. Firstly, we now have enough evidence to act. We now have enough evidence from theoretical frameworks, such as Dan Siegel talking about moving from me to we, so the idea of we, the idea of an embedded, integrated sense of self that no longer subscribes to the illusion that self is separate from others, but actually goes right back to the great contemplative wisdom traditions that have had very many methods of helping us experience and train our sense of consciousness to actually get a deeper sense of our interconnectedness, and how that actually parlays into practical frameworks. So we talk about theoretical frameworks like Dan's, and it was talk about practical frameworks where I heard from the economics panel, there was a gentleman, Christian, can't remember his surname, I'll put it in the link, where he starts a think tank and also a practice tank called Economics for the Common Good. And in his session, for example, to give you a case of what practical frameworks look like, he talked about returning to the root of economics as economia, as the Greeks had it, was actually a concept to organize society such that it ends up serving the greater good. And it's just, like many things, something that has fallen out of sight. So we have the critical mass, we have enough ideas, we have these common platforms and frameworks and communities and ways, and we also have the technology to allow us to collaborate in a distributed network way, which just wasn't able before. And that's very exciting for change agents like myself, because it just means that we now have the potential to make change happen, and to potentially make change happen fast. There are also enough ideas to test bid everywhere. And what I mean by test bid everywhere, let's take tomorrow's panel for example. It's going to be on education. I am not sure, of course, not having attended the panel, what the panel is going to include. But I got one clue from Catherine Weir, who was the introduction of the education panel, and she gave an early clue when she said that when we look at education, in our specialized session, we're not just going to look at education for children. We're going to look at education for all. We're going to look at education as a means, to get oneself to just keep, delivering to one's potential, and the multiple opportunities and the multiple touch points. So these ideas to test bid aren't just to be isolated to schools or to specific areas, but they're really to take and to try everywhere. And the second point that I'm going to make in this podcast, or whatever you call this, is going to be talking about that. So I think the third thing for us to look at is also a matter of urgency. So not only do we have this rollout test bidding, we've got the critical mass, we've got the ideas, we've got the platforms, but we also are united in a way that we haven't been united before. We're united by universal problems. Climate change is one, mental health is another, and these are border problems by nature. These are transnational problems. These are transgenerational problems, and we heard it from epigenetic specialists today talking about how our bodies actually respond to trauma, and abuse, and a lack of love and compassion in the system. For 2-3 generations, that was within the nutrition panel. So we looked at the effect of having a soil-starved a nutrition-starved soil, and how that actually impacts, for example, our gut bacteria. So, it was just so holistic and beautiful to see what this conference has sought to do, which is to piece all these puzzle pieces together, actually what that composite picture looks like. So being united by these universal problems of increasing urgency is a great galvanizer, and having the common platforms and frameworks allows us to have a common language, a common explanatory model to all feed our ideas into, without us falling into, say, for example, if I don't know, let's just pick a nonsense example. Let's say if you were bringing up your child, when I was looking after my kids' upbringing, there was a common debate that went around: do you feed your child on demand, or do you feed your child according to a schedule? And I think that kind of binary thinking just serves no one. And what has been so thrilling in the last 2 days has been to see how this integration perspective has manifested itself again and again, what it actually looks like to have a platform or a model or a framework that's sufficiently broad enough to be able to fit in a lot of diverse thoughts and viewpoints without them, ending up in a mutually irreconcilable tension, which then ends up with one people on one side of the camp and the other people on the other side of the camp. I'll give you a specific example of this. So Dan Siegel, in his keynote, talked about this, interpersonal biology. I probably got that wrong. I'm just going to leave this mistake on the broadcast anyway, and I will do my research and I'll write it in the notes to this broadcast later on. But the point is that he came up with the definition of how to think of consciousness that was sufficiently robust and broad enough to be able to secure 100% agreement from 40 different scientists that this is a working definition they can all agree upon. And he goes into that at length, and I hope to have a chance to share another broadcast on his work because it was just extraordinary. But that's, I think, the potential that we're working with nowadays when we actually have these explanatory models that have room enough for everybody. And as you can see, there are clearly parallels to my work with diversity and inclusion. I mean, with all this talk about belonging, it's all very well and fine to talk about how nice it is to belong. But the trick is, how does one overcome one's sense of self? How does one go, to take the words of today's conference, beyond confines, beyond personal confines, beyond interpersonal confines? We go into transpersonal confines. And how do we actually do that? So that brings me to the second point. What's the next step, after we've learned all this great stuff about, rollout and blah, blah, blah? So I thought about it and I thought, okay, the next step is really for each of us listening to this, each of us present here today, to take what we've absorbed and literally bring it to life. So we bring it into our own lives, we bring it to life, we bring it into our own lives, we manifest it, we take actions, we change our mindsets, we try little things. Now, as a coach, right, I mean, you come up with a lot of resistance to change because we're creatures of habit, and we've been, carrying these programs around us for so long, blah, 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 culture, this, that, so on and so forth. So how do we actually go about, doing this grand sounding thing, which is, to take what words on and bring it to life? So I've got some good news for you, because actually, let's just think about what we're being asked to do or to try out here. The first thing is that it's actually easier to get started on this than we think, because the universal first step that emerged from all the different sessions where they talked about change is to start with personal transformation, to start with personal change. Again, that sounds so highfalutin. Oh yeah, I'm going to transform myself. What does that actually mean? that actually means something very, very simple, which is it breaks down into a moment, a single moment. And for those of us who meditate, or those of us who have tried mindfulness or have explored a little bit, we know that actually our experience of consciousness is a seamless flow of moment to moment possibilities. Okay, for us to try something, to do something, to think something different. So let's just stop and think about what this means. This means that we, you and me, okay, are living right now in a ceaseless stream of open invitations to make ourselves happier. I'm going to say that again. We are all right now living in a ceaseless stream of open invitations to make ourselves happier. Who wouldn't want to do that? Well, we are our own worst enemies sometimes because we are all prone to this illusion of self, and it's very hard to train oneself out of the idea of us being a limited, strong, resilient, being who has to go out there and make things happen on our own and secure our own happiness, and all of these narratives which are essentially fundamentally illusions, or constructs one way or the other. So when we actually stop and allow ourselves to dial down beneath these constructs, this is where we are. We realize that we're living in a ceaseless stream of open invitations to make ourselves happy, because these open invitations are nothing else other than moment by moment to connect ourselves to greater gratitude, or compassion, or kindness, or love, or generosity, or forgiveness. Take your pick. Take your pick. And I challenge you to try this out, that when you stop watching this, just take a moment and ask yourself, what's my next little act of kindness? And when you start to train your lens on the world that way, you will be surprised at how the world blossoms up for you. And when you start to do that, you can see that you will get to all the opportunities where you can interact with someone else or something else. And it could be that there might not even be a person at the other end of the street. It could be that you're walking past and you see a piece of rubbish, on the ground. There's nobody there to clap for you, or to say, oh yeah, well done, if you go and pick it up and put it into a rubbish bin. But you just pay attention to yourself. How do you feel? You feel good. And that brought up one of the best slides of today, which was a picture of the Dalai Lama, and it had 4 words in it. And it said, be selfish, be generous. That's right. Be selfish, be generous. What does that mean? That means when you allow yourself to connect to this deep moment of feeling good, and much of today's work was around altruism and the profound impacts of showing care and love, in a society, and how underutilized as a tool that is, and therein lie the seeds of much of the change for the better, whether it's through business or whether it's through personal example. This next step, this easier to get started than we think, this universal first step, starting with personal transformation, breaking down to a single moment, and in that single moment, we just simply have to ask ourselves, what's my next little act of kindness? And then once you've done the next little act of kindness, it could be taking a deep breath, mind you. I'm not very good at breathing consciously. Are you? I'm not. Breathing for me is a forgotten function. I just rush about my day as usual, like I'm sure many of you watching this do, and you just forget to breathe. So stopping to take a breath is a profound act of kindness to oneself. It can be as absurdly simple as that, but try it often enough. And then I ask you to pay attention to how did it make you feel. You can own this feeling of benevolence. You can own this feeling of well-being without condition. And that is the practice. That's it. So what I love about reaching this, I suppose, conclusion is that what I am inviting each of us to do is actually something that's very, very beautiful, feels really, really good, costs nothing, is easily practicable. It can be completely private. You don't have to tell anybody about it. You can, of course, but you can totally just do it and just try it out. And I think as an empirical scientist, that's the best part. There's no dogma, there's no framework or whatever. You don't have to believe. Just try it out. Just go and do an act of kindness and see how it makes you feel, and do 3 acts of kindness and see how that makes you feel. And I think this is really what ultimately the seed of change, the spearhead, the leading edge. When they say very often, and you've heard it, oh yeah, change starts with me, and Gandhi says, be the change you want to see in the world. Sometimes that can land quite naively or cynically, or something. Yeah, it's not that easy. But really, when you analyze it this way, you're kind of left with not very much choice but to think, actually it's not that difficult. No one's judging me. I don't have to do it for any bouquets or avoid any brickbats. It can be imperfect. I can feel a bit stupid doing it, but I'm just gonna try. So that's my gift to you. I hope you enjoyed watching this, and I would love to hear any thoughts of yours, or if you've actually tried this out for yourself. I'd love to know how has it made that little personal transformation in you, and how does that knock-on effect add on to the rest of your day? Do you feel like there's a bit of a shift? And then just add in the incremental power of joining these little moments bit by bit whenever you get to do them. Just imagine what your life will be like when you have this as a regular practice in your life. All right, it's been a great pleasure leaving this for you. I'm looking forward to maybe another one tomorrow. Just to round it up, and now I'm going to go into the retreat, which I'm super excited about as well. Take care, and speak to you soon.